Hello, people. This is Tea and Politics with Maya, and I am Maya. Welcome to another episode of a nice, interesting conversation, which is always dedicated on power and empowerment, leadership, and having to know an interesting person. And having said that, I'm so happy to welcome Angela with us today. Welcome. How are you?
I'm really good, Maya, and it's really, really, really wonderful to see you again. And I'm delighted to be with everybody. Thanks for inviting me.
It's so nice to have you. I want to share, of course, there is such an impressive biography that I will share in the link of everything in the description of the episode. But to me, how I know you and how I see you, you're one of the few people that I think I will always remember you. Like we had a workshop. I was part of a group you were supporting into the feminist leadership topic, I think last year or 2 years ago.
2 years ago.
And the things that you said in this workshop, I was like, oh my God, when somebody just unveils something hidden like a gem. And some of the things we've discussed in this workshop were so fundamentally obvious, but also so fundamentally new to me. And I don't think that I will ever be able to forget our first meeting. So thank you very much for that. I think that you all know what I mean in a couple of minutes. Let's start by asking how do you describe what you do? I think that's a good question to start.
How do I describe it, but what I do? I think if I described it from my heart, it would be supporting women, change makers, game changers, catalysts of social change to actually create that change in the world, and particularly to transform the leadership paradigm in the process. So on an individual level, I help women leaders really root themselves in the best of who they are in order to grow wings and to spread the change like wildfire collectively.
And you do that individually with women. You also do that in a group like the one experience I described.
I do it with so those groups. I think it's really important to co-create together. And for a long time, I was an independent. And what I realized is we don't have a lot of impact by ourselves, not really. In fact, one of my coaches used to say, if you can do your project on your own, it's not big enough. And so,
oh wow, okay,
yeah, it was quite with kindness. And I have loved working with Joanna Maycock, in fact, and together we have led that retreat you came to. We have 70 women have now gone through that retreat, and the impact of it is amazing. And so, so I think that there's something about working with groups of women in particular that is so generative and regenerative, and just watching how together co-creating, recognizing that we're sharing common problems, common challenges, and being able to put down any competition, any barriers, and really sink into what can we create together and what are our strengths in order to do that is so much fun. And then, Joanna and I both continue, in fact, to work individually, because there's a link between the individual and, of course, the collective. So the more aligned, the stronger, the more confident the individual, the more strong and confident the collective.
I remember during the workshop, I mentioned already, there were several things which made me feel very seen, activities, conversations. And I think that it's also interesting to explore how come you decided to do exactly that? Because I think I will just put it from a business perspective. It's a very specific, very useful, and very interesting intellectual product, the one that you're doing with Joanna, these retreats, but also as a general direction of your work. I think it's very particular that you're working exactly with political leaders, women in the civil society space, and you're supporting them for their leadership skills. That's like the tiniest, nichiest, you've seen something. Why did you decide to work exactly on that?
That's such an interesting question. I have wanted to work on that for as long as I can remember. And do you want me to give you a little history?
No. I don't need anything to be in a little. We have 4 hours, as long as you're not late for Merota.
Okay. Perfect. So I wanted to work for UNESCO when I was when I'd finished my study. I don't remember how that came about, but I just knew the two things. One, that education was the key to transforming the world, and women were the key to transforming the world.
Okay.
And so by every way I could, from my little town in New Zealand where I grew up, and then I went and moved to Australia, did study, and moved back to New Zealand. I tried to get to a job with UNESCO. So fast forwarding a little bit, by an amazing stroke of synchronicity. I'd like to call it synchronicity more than luck, because that's a thread. We keep taking action towards what we want, but we never know how it's going to happen. We don't control everything. Okay. And so I met somebody by chance. Things weren't happening through the traditional route of sending out my CV and everything. So I thought,
do they ever happen like that?
Not for me. Not for me. And so I kept sending my CV. It didn't work. I got refusals, and I thought, I have to get to France. So I moved to France, and I was at a party in one of my first 2 weeks there. People said, well, you have to meet friends of friends of friends. And I was talking to a girl, and she went, why are you here? And I went, I really want to work for UNESCO, but I just couldn't get in. And she went, my boss, I work for UNESCO. Would you like to meet my boss? And it sort of all went from there. So I had a conviction that I knew this was the way. And so basically I worked for UNESCO, and I became, from the height of my 25-year-old self when I arrived in France, I had a lot of illusions about how the world worked. And I had these ideas that all of these people who came from all around the world and who were working for social good and for really creating a different paradigm, I had an idea of them of perfection. Mm-hmm. And so when I started seeing politics and how politics played out in the office and how budgets were kept from a level that I wasn't high up, right? I was just starting out. After 6 years, despite the amazing boss that I had, who I just loved, and who was not only knowledgeable but such a supportive boss and really helped me grow, I decided it wasn't the place for me. And but I was devastated, because I thought we still need to change things in the world. Mm-hmm. How am I going to do that? And I went out by myself, and I decided I would design a program for helping women in, at the time I had in my mind Tibet and India, to gain confidence, because I noticed that a lot of the programs that I had been working on, which were great programs, so this isn't an either or, but I felt that what was missing was that all the programs were either about basic education, teaching women and girls to read and write, which is absolutely fundamental, or from their vocational, but there wasn't anything about really the way we think and the words we use to speak about ourselves. And so from a place of I'm worthless, there's not a lot of hope. There's the best I can count on, the best I can hope for is really, like improving my not my social status. The best I can hope for is to be able to feed my children. And I thought, wow, that's already fantastic. But what if we started working on something about confidence and helping women really see, no matter where they were, that they had so much strength. And I know that some will always rise like that. Some of us, no matter where we are, we'll have the idea that we can do anything, and we will be invested with a particular flame for that. And then there are so many others that if they just knew how valuable they were, they would be able to surpass all expectations of themselves in a really healthy and growthful way. And so I designed a program. And I thought, right, and I put on my backpack and I went to India for my 40th birthday, and I went, and it was all about creating. And so for me, I grew up in a household where we really, I moved from New Zealand to Australia when I was 11, and my parents basically said, you create your life. We're young, we don't have a lot of money. Whatever you want pocket money, you go and knock on doors to get it. And I learned from my parents at that time, so I'm sort of weaving in and out as to how I got into what I'm doing now. I learned from my parents at that time that anything was possible, that you could create anything. At the time, it was you just had to work hard enough. I think there's a little more to it than that. You need a bit more help than that. It's easy to say that from a privileged place. And also, we need other people to help us. That's, the things I've learned along the way. Anyway, I wanted to bring what I knew of like self-confidence, I think, to these women. And so I created this program called Opening Doors. And the first day was all about the negative ways we speak about ourselves, how we cut ourselves off from our natural strengths, how we hold ourselves back and put ourselves down, and not as separate from structural inequality, but just what is our own role, and how has that happened. So it wasn't therapy, but it was about just being able to identify. If you can't name the fact that you're having these thoughts about yourself, then it's pretty hard to do anything about it.
Sometimes you normalize having those thoughts, and you don't consider, not only you don't consider it wrong, but you consider it as a basis of absolutely everything else.
Exactly.
And not be able to identify and dissect them makes them dangerous.
Exactly. Because they become an identity of who you are.
Yeah.
So I guess my goal there was to help deconstruct an identity of not being good enough, of being worthless. And so I showed this particular, and then to build who we really are, right? To really look at, but I have these strengths and I have this capacity. And so in 2 days, that was the program. And I took it to India and I saw some really cool NGOs, and they were like, yes, we really need this. We don't have anything like this. And of course, it was all about art and creativity, because I studied calligraphy for 8 years, and I thought, wow, I can bring this in, like in multiple languages. And I noticed that for myself, creativity has been not only therapeutic, but powerful. And I believe that everybody is creative, and women are exceptionally creative. And so to be able to bring that into a program, I was ready to launch it. And then for personal reasons, I knew also at that time, as I went home, I have 3 small children and I don't think I'm going to stay married. And my first thought became, I'm not going to be able to do this. Go all the way from France to India several times. I felt very isolated as well. And one of my friends said, could you do that for us? And I went, oh, because Western women need this? I didn't really think they did. And so, I know, right?
But it's a fair point, because I think that many times where we think about, marginalized, I don't like that, but when we speak about marginalized communities, we always tend to think of somebody else, first of all, and somebody who is not in the West, somebody who is, I think that we have this particular picture of somebody being in poverty, and only then they would need the help. And I think that many people don't show poverty, first of all, and other people don't show that they need support because they're not thought in that way. And in a way, everybody can get some support.
Everybody needs support, in fact. And so to make this relatively long story short, I actually did launch it with a whole group of women around me. And from there, it built and it went really well. And then from there, somebody said, would you coach me? And I was like, oh, no, I'm not a coach. I just have this program that I thought would be really useful, and it's what I know how to do. And from there, it just shows a synchronicity, right? But what I realized was, so I went and did coaching training, and that continued. And what I realized was missing for me was the original reason that I really wanted to do this. So I thought, I want to somehow get back to doing this with women who are leading change in the world, because I just am in my bones, in my soul, in the deepest part of me, a change maker. And I believe that we need to change the leadership, transform how we see leadership, what that actually is in the world. We need to transform the way we think about power. And it was like a flame that kept, pulling me forward, like lighting me up and pulling me forward. And I went, oh, these conversations are nice about like marginally changing people's lives. And that is important. And my real energy was elsewhere. And I happened to sign up. So this always happens synchronistically. I signed up for a leadership training in Cancun, of all places.
That's a nice place to have a training.
It is a lovely place to have a training. And my divorce had just come through. And I had read somewhere that if you if you wanted to invest a small amount of money, what should you invest in? And I thought, well, I have to buy a house. I need to look after my kids. I was a single parent. But everywhere I was reading, it said, if you have any money, invest in your training and skills, because that is who you're bringing into the world. And I went, right. So this training was really expensive. And I went, oh my God, it's like, this is a year's rent. Am I being an irresponsible mother? And I went, push the button. I went, go, because this is what will lead you forward. And I went to this amazing leadership training, and it really was the highest quality of any training I'd had at the time. And I happened to be in the beautiful ocean on the last day of that training, and I heard this fantastic woman with an Australian accent. And so I just thought, I have to talk to this woman. She has an Australian accent. And we got talking in the waves, which then became our ocean office. And I was talking about the importance of, this leadership work for women who just couldn't access it the way we could with this money. And I went, everybody needs this.
Yeah.
Everybody needs this. And we had a brilliant conversation about it. And this was my friend Alison Tate.
Okay.
Who said, you need to come with me. And I said, Australia. And she went, oh, no, I live in Brussels. I went, fantastic. And so once again, from a conversation and for, really speaking about what I believed was true in the world, we meet the people. And again, through Alison, I met Joanna, and through Joanna, I've met you. And I remain that this is important work, and it fires me up every day, having these conversations. And did I answer your question?
That's
I could ramble about
background
this.
story of why the hell do you work? What do you work? It's the best answer. I was imagining, how these Hallmark films, they have like the waves and the beach, and you and Alison having your beach conversation there. It's a great story.
Looking bedraggled completely.
No, I think it's an interesting view of how you walked us through how you ended up here, because of course we are combination of our identity, of our childhood, of our meetings, of our professional context. So yeah, I think it's a very good answer. And it also made me think of so many things while I was listening to you. So the confidence part, your first program with women in India, I think that we lack confidence. I think that there's maybe not been another time in human history where people self-doubt all the time, so much, so fundamentally, 24/7. Of course, I don't have proof if women do it more than men, but I think that women tend to do it more. I don't know if I don't have data for it, but I've seen, and I was joking with you before we started, that most of the women I've recorded with this podcast have said the same sentence. If you think that the episode sucks, more or less, please don't use it. Maybe I'll just say really, really not useful things, and maybe I won't be interesting enough. And I have the best women in Brussels being guests here. And I don't know why would anyone think of that? Why do people self-doubt, you think?
It's so interesting, your question, because we do live in a male by default world, and I hear women speak all the time about imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And first of all, I don't like the word a syndrome, as if it was some form of real illness that we had. A condition. It's absolutely a condition.
I've been diagnosed.
Yeah, you have it. And this is what you need to take for it. It's like a confidence pill. And that also leads to the confidence question's quite an interesting one as well. So it is normal to feel like you don't fit in a world that hasn't been designed for you. So if we could stop seeing it as an imposter syndrome, we have this underlying, and I say me too, right? Because I was one of those women that said, if this isn't, what you want. So despite years of training and, years of I would say building confidence. I want to do a slight aside. What I've really learned through the years is confidence is a result, not a requirement. So we think we need confidence before we do something. We actually build confidence, all human beings, in practice, in doing something. So it's always later on or after that we feel confident. So that's just on a general level. But on a particular women in a male by default world level, we learn very early that we should be functioning differently. And so we're socialized to believe we need to function a certain way. We're socialized to be the carers. All human beings are actually caring and have the capacity for empathy, but we're socialized to be the ones to care. Care is devalued, so we're all paid less. And then we're told all we have to do is be confident. So there's this confidence thing. I have an ambiguous relationship with it because it's also fix the women, just go and stand up and be more confident, and then you'll see. And of course, then you go in and you're more confident. It's like, don't be so aggressive. You shouldn't speak so loudly, or don't take up so much space in the room. It's unbecoming, but you could smile more. So there's a natural confidence that we can have in who we are, in what our skills are, in generally, we have gifts that we come into the world with, and we can nourish those gifts and be confident in those gifts. But we are set up in a world, I think Caroline Criado Perez, if I've said her name well, in the book Invisible Women. Have you read it?
No, I haven't.
It's a fantastic book that speaks to the data gap in particular for women, but how just like we are left out. We are not counted in things, but not on purpose, simply because we're an aftersight.
Yeah.
And it's pretty hard to have confidence in a world where you're an aftersight. So we're just not calculated. And I know that there'd be lots of pushback on that, saying, yes, we are. It's, not done on purpose, but it is. Even bus routes, if in her book, which really struck me, there's so much in her book, but bus routes into town were just just designed by men who were the engineers, because that's the way they went into town. But the women using the buses, they didn't take into account, as the carers, having to drop kids somewhere and then having to go shopping over there. So this straight line has been an absolute bane of most women's life, the straight route into town, for example. So it's just, these are the sort of afterthought. It's been, I'm making the world for me and the world. So this male by default world, to come back round, it's pretty normal when, every time we stand up for something, to be told that we're not in the right place and it shouldn't be like that. And then so we start to doubt ourselves. Well, maybe everyone else is right. And we've also, had to protect ourselves so much. Every time we've had to fight for the right to vote. We've had to fight for the right to have a bank account. I mean, I think it was even France. It was 1970 or early 1970s. A woman had to ask her husband to have a bank account. These are the things that my daughters take for granted. But
they're not.
They're not. We've had to fight for them. So we've had to fight to be equal citizens. We are still fighting to be equal citizens. I mean, and this is don't let me get into all of the other countries where it's,
I think it's a fair thing to say that confidence should not be expected, I think. But I think that we also, I was thinking about my own experience with imposter syndrome, for example. I never thought, first of all, I heard about that. To me, that's a Western thing. So me as a Bulgarian, we're not particularly confident because of our socio-ethnic situation. We've been in a very tough space as a country. And I think the way that women are brought to, all people are brought to, we're not very confident. And for example, the first time I've seen like the American way of being a leader or these TEDx talks, to me, they seemed very strange. I was like, why are those people like that? What that's so... It looks artificial to me. I would never feel like that. So I think it's also a cultural thing to be confident. And it's not only a social thing, it's a cultural thing, but it's also a personal thing. So there are so many layers of it. And the first time, going back to the imposter syndrome, I think I was maybe in my early 30s. I've never heard of imposter syndrome. It took me, I need to literally Google Translate it. And it's like, what the hell is this? Like, I don't understand it. Like, why would I feel not good enough for the position? I worked so hard. And then, well, that's disclaimer. I didn't get imposter syndrome. It was brought to me.
Tell me that.
Yeah. I will never forget it. So it was during a previous position in a Euro organization. And I had such a misogynistic colleague. And then he would ask the dumbest question with like a very wide open, and he was like, I was looking through your CV, and I'm his boss at the time, by the way. I was looking through your CV, and I'm wondering why'd you get the job? And I was like, what do you mean? And there was like excessive interviewing problem. Like I was assessed by HR people. Like it was so detailed. I got the job because I was good, but I didn't reply that. And I was like, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, I'm just looking at your CV. And first of all, you're so young. And then you were just working like in really small organizations before that. And by the time I really tried to have good arguments, and then when I went home, I was like, what the hell? Why would you ask such a dumb question? Like, why would you feel? Mm-hmm. And then I actually got the imposter syndrome. And every time I would go and have a speech, the first few speeches I had after that event, I would start with, hi, I hope that I will not waste your time because I'm coming. Yeah. And I was like, I'll be very short. And I was trying to take
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually I heard what I was saying. And I was, that's really not me. Why the hell do I sound like that? But it took me a while to get over this imposter syndrome that was brought to me because I didn't feel that I had it before. So it's this confidence imposter syndrome is very strange because sometimes it goes away, sometimes it comes back, and it's not a constant thing. And I thought it is before.
I love that you said it goes away and comes back, and how it's like those insinuations, those questions, those doubts that are cast, how that plays in with the doubts that we didn't have, and then go back and start, the ageism, the ideas that you have to fit into a particular box to be able to lead, rather than really looking for the threads of, the power that somebody could have, and just the assumptions that I'm hearing, and how they're brought back in. And what I notice is how women are trying to take up less and less space. I'll try and and also from a collaborative point of view, there's this idea that if I take up less space, then my sister will have more.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, we did this exercise. What if everybody could have space, but what I noticed, it's the same thing with women. I won't take up too much of your time. And it's
take the time.
Take the time. Take the time. Take the space. Move your arms up.
Take the time.
Do the power pose.
Yes.
Take the time.
We are slowly going towards the political part of your job. And well, that's the other thing we discussed before. I do see you as part of the political ecosystem in Brussels. You didn't see yourself in that way.
I didn't.
And we didn't argue, but we disagreed politely. Why I see your role as a policy function, okay, not politics when it comes to like parties and all that, but I do see you as a political person because you work with people in power, with women in power, with women in different leadership position who shape the current EU environment. And why do we don't see that eye to eye?
That's so interesting. I think that comes back to not naming things. I think it's really important for us to name things. And I hadn't distinguished it, named it. And it is absolutely true. My dedication is to work with women in power so that they can grow this new leadership paradigm. And civil society is so important. One, at upholding democracy and spreading democracy. Well, I'm holding it right now, protecting it.
Yeah.
But also civil society. I think this is where my heart is. I have known since I was little that we need to change things. We need to change things on so many levels. And we live in I think I'm going too far forward, but yes, I can see that now from what you've said. And my heart is in supporting women because it is so much harder. We get so much pushback. We've just launched we're publishing a survey next week with Joanna Maycock and Céline Charviard, I always get her name wrong, and Héloïse Baudin, and that has been supported by Jeff and Feps and I can't pronounce. I've got the same.
I'll list them.
Yeah, thank you. You'll have to cut this bit. But it's about the state of women leaders in civil society, and they are in burnout from being under-resourced. I wouldn't say that they're overgiving in the sense that they're desperately diving into overgive, but there is so much to do and so little funding for it, because all of the funding, of course, goes out into the organizations and the people who need it. And so it is so important to support the women in leadership in civil society. And yes, we need to redefine what power is. We need to redefine this paradigm that is only power over and coercive and top down. And that is a mammoth task to transform a whole system. It's a mammoth task for people to transform their own system. And we have an inbuilt immunity to change anyway. So the inbuilt immunity to change in the whole world is that
it takes a lot.
And a world that's built on fear. You were asking me about the rise of the far right. My blood runs cold because the coercive systems of power that are in place that are built on fear, that stimulate people's fear, that have people shrinking and then projecting out onto others that everyone else is the enemy, is the system that we first of all, it's the system that's actually part of creating a big part in creating the climate crisis that we have. And the extraction. I mean, I'm just, as I say this, I'm stumbling over my words because it starts at an individual. It doesn't just start at an individual level, but the extraction we have of ourselves. I work with women who extract from themselves to lead. So that's how deeply ingrained the fear system is. And then that spreads out over the whole planet. And then these systems that just want to protect by dividing and then keeping keeping the power, keeping the resources more than anybody, particularly one person would ever need or one group would ever need.
Controlling the narrative of everything.
Controlling the narrative of everything. I think that the earth will survive, but I'm not sure that whole humanity will if we keep going like this. And this is why we need a shift. And that shift is from reactive to creative. And reactive is the way that we are now. And we need to shift our humanity in terms of adult development and leadership needs to shift into a creative, I'm going to say self, but I mean a whole self. It can be an individual self, but a whole self. Reactive self that's fear-based cannot work anymore. It will not only... I'm going to say it this way. I used to want to save the world. Then I realized that we needed to create the world. We're getting back to having to save the world. So I still believe that we need to create a new paradigm in order to save the world and then create forward. And for that is an up-leveling and self-awareness for everybody, particularly for all leaders and political leaders in particular. We need a rise in integrity, and integrity in terms of wholeness, so that's self-awareness, but then also recognizing that there are other parts of ourselves that can lead other than fear. In fact, that should lead other than fear, right? We have the capacity to evolve our human brains. We have an evolved part of our human brain, and we're all working from the less evolved part. And that's not going to save the world or create the next.
Unfortunately, fear is very powerful and can be very dominant of a feeling, even in one person. And it's scary that we have to go back to saving the world. I thought that that was behind us in a way. And on the other hand, for the last 3 years, I've been in Brussels, meeting great people, meeting horrible people as well. Sometimes they make me not only not want to save the world, but just like, let it, okay, whatever. And I think that it's a matter of us to, in a way, self-motivate to not give up, because the environment around us is not very it's more of a fear-dominated environment rather than creative environment. And I think that it takes skills and competences and constant reminders of for leaders to not give up.
Absolutely.
And I think that's very tough, because you cannot say that in front of your team or in front of your network or in front of your members that, well, guys, it's really tough, and I'm actually really annoyed with everyone, and I'm so unhappy with the right wings being a thing now and not just an exception. So my question to you is, I'm coming from a long question, try to shorten it, but this context now is tough for leaders. And I think that it's even more difficult for women in leadership position. So how do you support them? What do you do with them to equip them with the right tools? Because the world is based on fear. I mean, like it or not, it is like that. And that metaphor, building bridges, building walls, we are building walls. The bridges are gone. And there's so many wars. The climate change, as you said, it's not... there are still people who believe it's a myth. Let's start from there. And we're jumping from a crisis to a crisis. So what do you do in your work with women to make them, not to make them, you cannot make anyone anything, but to support them?
It works on an individual and collective level at the same time. And I think I love what you've just said, because I just heard you say, we can't say something. The old paradigm was that a leader had to be infallible. And I think there's a difference between being infallible and having integrity. So while we need to step in and model leadership, and I'll get to how I help support women, the individual side of this is, yes, it is our personal responsibility, I believe, every day to well, first of all, our biggest enemies are our own resignation, fear, and cynicism. And I have it too. Like I could get up in the morning and go, the task is so mammoth. You know, I get that we all hunker down like they used to in medieval societies and say, this is my space and this is what I'm going to protect, right? That makes sense. It makes sense from a fear perspective, because there's only so much that one person can do, first of all.
Yeah.
And so, you know, one of the major pillars of feminist leadership, one of the 4 pillars, and Joanna Maycock, if you ever get her on here, which I think would be great. She's, with all of the feminist work that she's done, she speaks of it in 4 pillars, with courage at the center as the 5th. And that is collaboration. We will never really create something different on our own. So the role of our personal responsibility for myself every morning is getting up and starting with, I know I have cynicism and I know I have resignation, and that's not all of what I have.
Okay.
I have also capacity, and I have support, and I have people around me, and also I have a vision that I believe in. And that vision is what I connect with first thing in the morning. One is recognizing, because I think we can't step over and pretend that we don't have cynicism or resignation or fear. And so coming back to you when you're with a team, I think there's something about being able to honestly acknowledge it with some authenticity, and also acknowledge that it's in the space. So from a leader being stoic and saying, I have to be the one who pretends everything's okay, I think that's the old leadership. It's the one that's actually destroying the world, that says, you know, there's only one person who can do this, and that person has to be infallible and tough. Well, what about being able to say, I'm actually human, and I have integrity, and being determined and drawing on devotion and some of the and curiosity and creativity, and saying, hey, team, we all have down days. We all have these fears. Let's get them out, and now let's continue to move forward. So that's the authentic part, you know, developing authenticity and integrity from there, and remembering. And it's a practice. It's an act of, for me, it's a what's the word I want to say? Conscious and intentional act to remember that I also have a brain that is capable of creating, not just of being fearful. And so that's what I support women to do, is to remember, in fact, their resources, and to continually and consistently over and over again reconnect with resources, and do that together. Because we're social species. We are not meant to do this on our own. No one is meant to do one thing. And women tend to think that they have to be the glue in between the cracks all by themselves. I have to hold this up by myself. And that also makes sense within the context of a leadership paradigm which has validated the lone wolf. You know, we're looking at, this person did that all by themselves. No leader got to anywhere all by themselves, ever. They had a team, they had a community, they even Alexandre Davinel, who's one of my, she's a French explorer, who's one of my inspirations, who said, marche à l'étoile même si elle est haute. A woman who had a vision and who knew what she wanted, and she was willful. That's what I loved about her. She crossed the Himalayas and was the first, I think she was the first Westerner into Tibet, not only, let alone the first woman. But even she had support. So recognizing that we don't have to do things by ourselves, letting go of the syndrome that I'm the only one that can do it, and realizing creating spaces, I think, is what I love to do, where women can actually relax. I've just, in every single retreat, what has come out of those retreats is, two things, because one thing specifically came out of the last one. One, a chance where I can put down my barriers, put down, all of my defenses, and actually, one, relax, and then two, co-create and realize that the other women around me aren't my enemies. I think we have been sort of taught that, again, if you have something, then I don't have it. Or or I need to be more like someone. I hear a lot of comparison, and just being able to drop the comparison. And be in a space where, when we can relax, we can create. We can't create from fear. We can only create from curiosity and a sense of almost full body relaxation, nervous system relaxation. And another of the participants just last week, or in fact just this week, just this week, said, we ran two back to back, and she said, what was the most useful for her? She said, all of you have been my mirror. And she said, but this is the first time that I have mirrors of kindness. Oh, wow. And I know, like, I've got goosebumps. Yeah. And she said, mirrors of kindness have helped me see that I am the face of a CEO.
Wow.
So just going back to what you said, when people are casting doubt, a CEO looks like this. I beg your pardon? A CEO looks like a person with a vision who has empathy and integrity and authenticity and kindness. And she walked out of there back straight, knowing that she had the resources and, not just within herself. So yes, within herself, but also together. And I think that it's like, we don't have to do it alone. If there's one message that I could get, this is it. I have skills. You have skills. So there's skills and then gifts. I get really inspired by the other women I work with. And once upon a time, I used to feel like diminished by it, like I should be more like them. I need to be more like her. If I was more like her, then everything would be okay, or I would be a better leader. Now it's like, wow, that woman really inspires me. What will help, not from a comparison of I am less than, but how can we work together with her strengths and my strengths? And also, what are the little tweaks that I can make to rise, not from a place of deficiency, but from a place of elevation? So it's allowing all of the diversity at the same time. I don't have to be like her. Our differences are actually what creates something magical and a space in which women can lead. But also, I'd really like to acquire that, because I can see that would be useful somewhere else. So how can I practice? And in neither case, we have to come from fear, deficiency, and competition.
Yeah. We are taught that we should. Yeah. And it takes time to not delete that, but in a way to forget that.
Unlearn.
Yeah, unlearn. That's a good word. You talk a lot about redefining power. And that to me was one of the first things that I was like, yeah, we do. And I never thought of the whole process of redefining something. To me is very interesting, because you can shape the narrative the way that you fit in.
Mm-hmm.
And that's so nice, especially if you generally don't fit in. And I think that if we have to be very honest, most of us don't fit in because you cannot fit in anything. You're a person. You shouldn't fit in.
No.
So I think that that's also redefining how we fit in.
Yeah.
So going back to the redefining power and you're working with women, would you be okay to share like a story with somebody's transformation or the support you've given to somebody and what you've seen? Of course, without any personal details, but
yeah.
It was so interesting to work with you. And then one of the things that I would also always remember is I was in the more or less reaching the breaking point of a burnout at a point, and I was telling that I have no juice left. I think that I'm busy all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think that I'm failing as a mother. I'm failing as a partner, as a friend, as a like somebody who likes to have their house with flowers and like tea. I'm not doing any of that. And I'm failing as a person and I have just no juice left. And you redefined that internal monologue for me. And he said, well, do you want to be the juicer? Do you want to have more juice in this juicer? Or would you rather be the tree where there's oranges coming out and you can have different juices on different times? And I was like, well, of course I want to be the tree, but I don't see it. I'm the juicer now. And it helped me. I've been going back to that conversation a couple of times. It takes time, but I'm becoming a tree. I'm not a juicer anymore. I'm transforming into an orange tree, into a mandarin tree.
Oh, beautiful. So I will answer your question, but what is it that helped you? Because you're a beautiful example in yourself, right? What is helping you shift from being the juicer to the tree?
I paused. I stopped for a minute and I looked around and I realized that I'm not where I want to be at all, and that I'm that to fit in sometimes is somebody fits you in. And I was put in a position where I disagreed with a lot of the things that were happening to me. And once that position was no longer mine, I managed to shape a new reality for myself. It sounds very surrealistic, but it's...
It doesn't to me. It sounds... that's exactly... You've spoken to two things that I think are really, really important. One, this is the fundamentals of coaching in particular and how I work with women. But one, what I have noticed, that any shift in power or any access to your true inner power comes from creating space first.
Yeah.
So that was just what you were saying. It's magical and almost banal at the same time. We don't create space. Women in particular, it's like I have to do for someone else first. The first thought when we get out of bed is what do I have to do and who for? And creating space, and it's an intentional part of my day. Nobody can book a session with me before 9:30 in the morning. Not because I'm not out of bed until 9:30, but because I get up really early. I meditate. Some people don't, but I write and I get what are my thoughts. And this is the work that we do in the workshops, the retreat. We call it a treat, thanks to one of the participants who said this isn't it's not a retreat, it's a retreat. So it's by creating space. With enough space to think, you reconnect with your internal wisdom. And when you reconnect with your internal wisdom, you start finding creative answers. Mm-hmm. The juicer comes from diving straight in and the doing. So there's this doing versus being. And I think what you have experienced, every single woman who has been at these retreats, and every woman I work with, in fact, it's like the minute you find a space to stop the mental noise, recenter, actually think, what do I think? Oh, hang on, this. And then you can start taking on the practices that are going to reinforce being the tree rather than the juicer more often. And then everyone has their internal wisdom about how to do that. So this other person who, with these mirrors, she went, oh my gosh, a mirror of kindness. Yeah. She went, I get to go back, like just her going back into her organization and saying, right, this is what I know the strategy needs to be. This is who I know I need to bring in and work with. And then some One of my clients, it was fantastic. She knew that she really needed to be in the country of her birth that she wasn't living in. She wanted to go back there, live with her family as well, with her twin sister. And she said, I'm in a, she was in an organization that she really loved, but she said as well, and that they had great leadership practices and they really supported staff. And she said, but I want to lead a project. I want to be the leader of this. And I want to bring in leadership that is collaborative and inclusive in a sector that wasn't particularly known for that. And within 6 months, where she said, but nothing's happening, and she's Irish. She said, nothing's happening in my country, in this area right now. Within 6 months, because again, synchronicity, you don't control everything. That's another thing, to let go of what you can't control.
That's so tough.
It is.
That's so tough.
Letting go of an identity of being the glue for everybody, which I think I'll come back to talking about power in the Karpman triangle, which is what we were talking about in the retreat this week, is that, shifting from a disempowerment dynamic to an empowerment dynamic. And it first works on an internal level, and because you're the external is a reflection of everybody's internal. So when you shift something internally, you start to shift externally how things go as well. And so this particular woman, she's literally in 6 months went to leading an organization and a team in her home country. She got her place with her sister, living with her sister in this collective household. And I was like, wow, the power of this work, right? And the power of a vision. The power of your vision is powerful. Trust it. The vision, that flame, that's something I have learned to trust my own life. Like sometimes it's like, this is never going to work. Nothing from where I was born in New Zealand would ever have, if you just looked at where I was born and what my family did. And, my dad was a truck driver. My mom was a nurse. And we were living in this little town in New Zealand. Nothing would have said that I would be here in Brussels doing this work.
You did.
I did. So that's it, this vision and following the flame, even when it seems like this is impossible, this is never going to happen. Yes, it is. It is when you trust it.
I've never had the internal voice that something is impossible. I've always felt a bit ashamed to say it, but I'm not sure if that's something to confidence or not. But for example, I told you about the tea house back in Varna, and this year it will be the 10th anniversary of the social tea house. It's a social enterprise which supports youngsters raised in orphanages and gives them their first job. It's a great mentorship program, and shout out to the people working there now.
Yeah, shout out.
When we started that, it was a couple of friends, me and my husband. We were in our mid-20s, and a lot of people were saying that this is just a very dumb idea and that there's no way it would work. I never thought of that. Never in a million years. Of course it's going to work. Of course it will be okay. And I think that it's a very important voice. I also have the other voices in my head. I mean, I also have this internal monologue that everything is bad. But when it comes to things to be achieved or to be accomplished, I always think it's going to work, which is also very dangerous.
Why is that? I think it's fantastic.
Because you have so much faith. Yeah. Sometimes I'm not sure it's confidence. I think it's faith. Because I think it's a bit of maybe both, but you don't have breaks to things.
Yeah. but also what you've just said is so important, because I think what's important is to be able to say, this is going to work, and not latch on to how. Yeah. And what happens very often when people lose faith is it's not working, but it's not that it's not working. It's not working the way we thought it was going to work.
Yeah.
And so it's this is going to work. Yeah, this is going to work. I think that's wonderful. That energy. When people are, and you did create it, right?
Yeah.
You did create it. And not only did you create it, you're creating it again.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's fantastic. But some people can very often, I think, lose faith when they don't see it working. Like they go, I'm doing this. It was a bit the same for me. I knew I was going to France. It was just like, well, clearly it's not going to work that way. So I'm going to have it work another way and not lose faith. Yeah.
Well, I want to go back to the conversation of women and men and leadership, because I think that faith is so abstract, and when we are in this like everyday world, this I don't know continuum of decision making crises, faith is forgotten. It goes back on at the background of the scene, if at all. And I think that sometimes both women and men lack faith in their lives, of course. But I want to go to the question of how they have it differently, even if they have faith. How do you think that women experience leadership differently than men?
So there's an inside and outside perspective to that too, right? You spoke to it before, even in yourself, the doubt that is cast on women. There's this, we still have the glass ceiling.
Yeah.
And now there's the glass cliff. Let's put the women in a position that has been degraded over time, get them into a leadership position where they're meant to save something where there's no woman who's actually been in the leadership of that organization in all the time that the situation has been eroding, put her there to save it. And then when, of course, she can't, because no one can save something at the very last minute. That's another superhero, Superman type thing. Then tell her she can't lead. So that's one way we experience it. The expectations that we have of ourselves, and that the world has of us. So the socialized expectations that we've internalized, patriarchal expectations, we're meant to do it all.
Yeah.
So look after the family, be the perfect wife or mother, and also lead an organization. And let's just say women are inherently capable, but at the same time, the expectations are far higher on women than what they are on men. The men in general. I know I'm generalizing, but still, that's still the paradigm. Men just have to go to work. They don't have to come home and be the perfect father.
Yeah.
You know, or the perfect father used to be for a long time literally getting home and being able to see the kids before they went to bed. In the meantime, who did everything else? And so that's for women who have children. But women are also carers of parents or siblings or friends. And even if they're not, then they're expected to work longer hours.
Yeah.
You know, because, well, if you don't have a family, you can put in more work. Those expectations aren't there for everybody. And then we face the doubt, and then we face the you're too emotional.
Oh God, I love that. Yeah.
Yeah, you're too emotional. How many women were put into asylums because of hysteria when they were placed into situations that were just inhumane. So and bit by bit, and you're too emotional. We need to have emotional. A lack of emotion leads to genocide. So, a disconnection with the soul, with the self, with the emotion, with empathy is a horrible and dangerous thing. And we have had the world led by people who've cut themselves off from their emotion. At the same time, we all, I don't know if we all know, but in my training, we learned that emotions are actually what fuel decisions. All decisions are fueled by emotion. Often that emotion is barely concealed hate. So there's a difference between expressing emotions that are really visible, and they're generally emotions that have been inappropriate, labeled inappropriate.
Yeah.
Well, thinly veiled hate or not even veiled hate is what has also led the world. That's an emotion. So just coming back to that, emotions are really important. Recognizing emotions, holding emotion, and all of that has been in an expectation that we shouldn't show it, all while decisions are still being made on emotion anyway.
I think that it's a very easy thing to involve women emotionally in leadership in one sentence, because it's a very easy win. Women are too emotional, so they cannot take good decisions. So therefore they shouldn't lead. But I've heard it so many times that I think that some people still believe it.
Well, I think a lot of people still believe it. And when you read also Caroline Criado Perez's book, Invisible Women, which isn't so much about the emotional side, but the fact that many medications aren't tested on women because of our inconvenient hormones. And then it's just,
hormones.
she's just hormonal. I mean, it leads back into this way of seeing things is a very binary way of seeing things. A right or wrong, good or bad, win or lose situation. All of us need to look at how we hold, particularly like for ourselves, for the women I work with, and any woman out there, but also the men. We cannot have a leadership that is only binary now. We need to be able to hold paradox. We need to be able to hold the messiness, because life is inherently messy. It doesn't go in a straight line.
Yeah, and we need to be able to accept complex things more than like black and white, right and wrong.
Yeah.
It's more than that.
But complexity is life, and we are more and more aware of it, but complexity has always been life. So trying to apply a one-size-fits-all or a binary right or wrong, this is all good, this is all bad, and, absolutism, sort of black and white thinking, it's the old paradigm. It's no longer. I would argue that it was never appropriate or adequate, but it's definitely no longer adequate. So learning to hold the paradoxes, that's a leadership that's actually available to everyone. But I think women, from the position that we've been in, we have a particular capacity to hold it and develop it. And unfortunately, the responsibility is actually falling on our shoulders for that too also.
Great.
I would hold it as a gift, but I know I've spoken to my trainers, my spiritual teachers, and they're like, I'm like, oh no.
No, the thing is that you see that, but it's again, it's a burden of fixing something that is particularly wrong, and it affects you, but it's also up to you to fix it. So it's a bit of like, okay, that. Okay.
Yeah. But I would say I heard your word fix, and I think where we need to go in our own vocabulary, our words create our world.
Yeah.
So the internal words, and then the words that we're speaking out. So the more that I'm going to say up level, but I don't mean up level just in terms of hierarchy, but I think we need to really generate new words and redefine things. And so fixing that, this has been the thing as well. Fix the women. So that they can fit into a leadership paradigm. No, we need a new leadership paradigm, and it is the women in that case who will bring that sort of feminist vision into the world. Care, collaboration, inclusion, and transparency of power with courage.
I think it's great that you mentioned words and how we speak. And I have a list. I told you that I have prepared a list of things that I've been told since being in position of power, in a leadership position. And I would just read them, and I'll ask you to give me some feedback. That, by the way, it's a chart of the top things I've been told as a woman in a leadership position. I created last year on the 8th of March.
Oh, so, beautiful day.
You should not push yourself that much. After all, you're a woman. Then another fella said, dear children, remember who you are with all of your work trips. I've also been told, actually that was a shouting match I had to listen to with a colleague of mine, the same misogynistic guy, by the way. You should just listen to me now. Okay, am I clear? You have to learn to listen to me. That was a guy who was junior to me, by the way. Yeah. I don't think that this is a task for you having in mind you're a young mother. You won't be able to make it, that's right. Yeah. When I'm reading it, I'm just getting annoyed, but okay, I'll try to go through the list. So no, I'm not going to let you continue. I know what you're going to say, and it doesn't contribute to the conversation at all. Thank you. You don't have empathy. Then can you behave more like a woman? That's one of my favorite things. More soft, more kind.
Can you behave like a woman?
Yeah. Oh. More soft, more kind. You're too aggressive and people don't like it. Why are you like that? You're too dramatic, you're too emotional, and that's not normal. Act more professional. And then the last two, your husband is not very lucky. Haha. No, I'm joking, of course. And last but not least, how did you decide to sacrifice your family for your career? No, don't get me wrong. It comes from a good place. I just want to know.
Don't get me wrong. The gaslighting in that. If you
I
speak,
need it.
oh my gosh, there's this other fantastic coach.
It's a good list, huh?
Oh my gosh. Oh. So I feel a sense of, when you've read that, I feel like this sense of both anger and frustration, and also sadness, extreme sadness that this is still going on. This is still going on today. And I think for any women listening to this, Emily Riley and Joanna Maycock. So Emily's this other amazing coach in Brussels, and they run this program called Inclusion Revolution. And it's really about dealing with this sort of what they call master suppression techniques, which are ways in which women are belittled and knocked out of the leadership conversation, like just down. That's those sort of words, the words that create our world. And then, of course, when you rise up with some form of indignation, it's like, oh, now you're too emotional again. It's like, what? So I can just, facing it every day. I've had that as well. You could smile more, or that's not very feminine, or this is the way a mother looks, or this is the way a woman looks. And looks, I think this has been said over and over and over again, or distinguished, that women in leadership, it doesn't matter whether you're head of the police force or whether you're a politician, the first thing they look at is, oh, what are you wearing today?
How are you dressed?
How are you dressed? Right? Yeah.
Do rather you wear than makeup. Yeah. I don't wear makeup. I never got the habit of doing it, and I actually did my whole makeup. I do it like 5 times per year, and I was in an event, and it was the funniest thing. So that guy, it's a really old professor we were collaborating with. He mentioned it like 11 times, like, I really like that you have makeup on tonight. I was like, that's a very odd thing to say. Thank you. I would just imagine that's you trying to compliment me. But then a couple of minutes later, he was like, you should do that more. And I was like, okay. And then one of my male colleagues who has like 3 sisters, I was like, that's just a very weird thing to say to a woman, that.
Yeah.
And he said, no, but she just looks very pretty like that. Yeah, you should do that more. It's really, really nice.
Because pretty is what the values, that's the value base, right?
I'm really not trying to be pretty though. I'm okay with, I feel pretty without makeup, and I don't feel prettier with makeup. I felt like having makeup, but then most of the time I don't. And it was a very weird exchange. But I think that it would be very strange, for example, to go to a male politician and say, you should put some foundation because your pores are short. Can you imagine that? That would be so weird.
Could you pluck your nose hairs, please?
Yes. Yeah, I can see the hairs also from your ears. Yeah. It's such an odd thing to say.
Well, it's not odd for them, but it's not odd in a socialized world. But it's really great that you see it as odd. And more of us need to see it as odd because we've internalized. I see many women who've internalized it, that you are here as an object, and pretty is the way I evaluate you by. And this is what pretty is, and this is what it should look like. And, if you are visually attractive, then everything's good and I can see you. It's like, what? So, yes. And I was just reflecting on these sorts of conversations and how that's so invasive and coercive. And this is what we're here to shift in the world.
Yeah.
And so what we need to do is set each other up. When I say set each other up to win, not win as if it's a competition, but keep supporting, keep calling it out. When you hear something like that happening, say, hey, that's not okay. Not colluding with it. And that takes courage. We can also not collude from a space of just being reasonable. It's just like, that's not an okay thing to say. I heard you say that to my friend or my colleague. Don't do that. That's unacceptable. And it reminds me of a New Yorker cartoon that I remember. I think I was an exchange student to Belgium when I love this country. I was an exchange student I think somehow things are woven into our lives.
Yes.
And I was 17 and I can't remember. I was in Brussels and I found these cards, and one was a New Yorker cartoon, and in fact, I still have it. I had a house fire and that was in a box in the garage, and it was one of the few things that didn't burn. And I pulled out, and so the card says it's a boardroom table and there are all men except for one woman at the table. And the card says, so the woman's, like, you can see the speech bubble, and she's made a suggestion. And one of the men, I think it's the chairman, says, That's a beautiful suggestion, or an interesting suggestion, Mrs. Jones. Maybe one of the men would like to make it. And I mean, it absolutely speaks to this, right? So this is why I hope one day I won't have this work to do. Like my vision would be, in fact, that I am no longer needed. And that would be a beautiful world.
That's your end game.
Yeah, we would be coaching for something else. We would be coaching for other things. And I mean, the role of coach to me is support and allowing someone to really express and explore and bring their gifts to the world in the most powerful and beautiful and complete way. In service, right now, it's in service of transformation of the leadership paradigm. I hope one day when that leadership paradigm, and I am saying one day when it has been transformed, that the coaching will keep being for simply helping people to express their gifts in the most beautiful way.
I hope so. I hope so. And I hope that we see it in our lifetime soon.
Yeah. And I will not let resignation. There are moments when, again, I think it's never going to happen. We need to call on each of us, say, hey, I'm having a moment. Help me generate, help me get back to source, help me get back to center. So your process of creating space, any space that you can be part of that's generative, that allows you to think and get back to your own thoughts, anything that you can do to get back to center again and again and again, and then help other women get back to center is actually going to create this leadership paradigm. And I feel that I want to say there's a difference between responsibility and blame, and we confuse the two very often. But if we get back to a position of responsibility and integrity and wholeness and hold it from there, which is a generative place, not a restrictive, minimizing space, there is a possibility, and it is, we can do this.
Well, that's just very inspiring, more or less an end of our conversation. I hope that people take what they need from this conversation. I love talking to you, and I was sure that it would be a nice conversation when I invited you. Before I ask you the last two questions, I want to shout out something very close to my heart. And by the way, speaking of leadership, speaking of values and attitude and responsibility, there are different ways to learn that. And one of them is actually over here. So that's called Barabar. It's a board game. It's a board game where you save the world. And you do that in collaboration with, for example, that's Nadia Murad. We have Simone de Beauvoir. We have, we have different people. Also Albert Einstein. And they're artists, they're entrepreneurs, they're activists, and they all support you in your mission to save the world. It's good for team buildings, it's good for families, and the best thing about that is that it's created by a Bulgarian NGO. It's available in English, German, Spanish, and Dutch. And by getting that game on www.barabar.eu, you're also supporting their human rights work. So do that. And it's a great game, and I absolutely recommend it. And I will not get tired of reminding about the game. So I want to wrap up. It was, first of all, it was really good to talk to you. I love talking to you. You're like a really warm person to me. That's how I feel, very warm when I talk to you, and you have very nice way of putting things into perspective for me. And I'm sure that that's also how people feel in your treats and retreats, and how I'm sure that our listeners feel now. I want to ask a personal question regarding what makes you feel happy, and how you feel happiness, because I'm sure that it's difficult, and we spoke about having the confidence to find the courage in yourself, and that sometimes it takes an effort. But I think that happiness is something which is not voluntary. Do you seek happiness, or do you just feel happiness? What makes you happy? I want to go there.
Okay. What helps me, what creates happiness for me is playing really awesome games like that. And I think also that's what's missing from leadership, is the realization that joy is actually so I'm going to come back to what makes me happy. How I source myself is what makes me happy. But joy is it's not just an emotion, it's a state that every human being can feel. And if we had more joy in leadership, the world would look completely different. And often we minimize the creative and generative power of joy. It gets like put into, oh, you're not living in the real world. And when there's so much suffering, how can I have joy? And just recognizing that cultivating joy is where you get all your resources and energy back. And from a resourced state, you're powerful. So, reinstating joy. So that's one of the things that what makes me happy is doing something that I'm aligned with. I notice that when I feel unhappy, it's staying in situations that I just feel diminished and under-resourced in. So happiness for me is continually creating and building. And the other things that make me happy are going for swims in cold water and constantly learning. Developing my curiosity. When I'm in curiosity, I'm happy. Even so, a situation is not reliant always on external circumstances.
Yeah.
Developing my curiosity means that I can find a place of peace. And when I find it at a place of peace or wonder or, those 10 positive emotions, then I can be happy. So I go swimming in the mornings when I can. I guess it's moving my body when I'm in movement as well as when I feel happy. I need my body to move. Like my body's not just something to carry my head around. So, moving, creating, playing, drawing, writing, and in conversations like this, I generate happiness by doing something I haven't done before, and also by saying yes to things. And I'm like, wow, that seems a little out of my range, but let's do it anyway.
Go for it.
Yeah, let's go for it. And being in conversation with really amazing women like you, that makes me happy. I come home and go, yeah.
Thank you. Same. Okay, well, the last question is always the same to every guest I have. And it's what makes you hopeful for the future? Because I think that in this dynamic world we live in, hope is something that we should cherish and we should feed. Yeah. And every chance we have, we should share our hope with other people.
Well, honestly, I mean this sincerely. What has me hopeful for the future are women like you. Who are doing things like this, Maya, who are putting their voice out there, who are putting voices out there, sharing voices, never stopping, never allowing themselves to, we have setbacks. And I think, so I would call you creatively resilient, because I think that we need to redefine resilience as well. And I run this creative resilience program, but you, and I really do mean this, it's not because I'm on your program, you are the epitome of that. I have this, I believe in this, I have faith in this, I'm going for it. And yeah, okay, I might have a setback, but I'm still going there. And this inspires hope. Every single one of the 70 women I have spoken to, including you, inspire hope. Every time I'm in another conversation with somebody who is standing for something bigger in the world, I feel hope. So it's like this regenerative and generative and regenerative upward spiral of conversation that brings hope. So please keep doing this. Keep putting this out. These games, they inspire hope. People who, no matter what is going on, they're like, no, look at this. We've got this new way forward. And they produce it. And then here you are speaking to it on your podcast. This is what gives me hope every day.
Wow. Well, that's a great grand finale. Thank you so much for being with me, and thank you so much for your support in the last few years. It's been nice to have somebody like you in my mental space, and every time where I don't find my courage, I think of our conversation about the juicer and the tree. So thank you very much for being here. And thank you for sticking with us. I hope that was as good for you as it was for me. And try to find something meaningful from each conversation.